Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today on the importance of scalable infrastructure for fintechs and financial institutions. I am Rashi Pandey. I'm head of partnerships and growth at Innovate Finance, and I'll be your moderator for today. So, a lot of us must be wondering, why is this topic so important? Well, as businesses adapt and evolve, scalability is amongst one of the biggest and most important technical considerations for any team. And today we'll be discussing the key considerations that fintechs and financial institutions need to consider in scaling their infrastructure, from making the most of the public cloud, moving to a private cloud, and connectivity, and key considerations in choosing your cloud strategy and the future for cloud in fintech and financial services. And I know we have quite a bit to go through today in today's webinar. So we have a stellar panel today to discuss this. And I would really like to welcome all our panelists today: Eric Mouillon from Bankable, Jason King of Yovota, Matthew Lempriere of BSO, and Travers Clark Walker of Thought Machine. And before we kick off, I would like to ask all the panelists to introduce themselves and their respective organizations. So Eric, Jason, Matthew, and then Travers, over to you guys.
Hi, so I'm Eric Mouillon, the CEO and founder of Bankable. So I know some of the people on the panel, so I'm very pleased to be with you, Rashi.
Thank you so much. Jason?
Hi, I'm Jason King. I'm the head of infrastructure over at Yovota, which is a highly flexible cloud-native core banking platform that enables innovative companies to build and deploy bespoke financial products for their customer needs.
Thank you. Matthew?
Hi, I'm Matthew Lempriere from BSO. We provide mission-critical infrastructure, data centers, cloud access services, and we run a variety of technologies globally, including ultra-low latency, microwave and millimeter wave services, and global fiber networks, and as I said, cloud access and data centers. So thank you for the invite to be here today.
Oh, you're most welcome. And Travers, last but definitely not the least.
Hi, Rashi. Thank you very much, and hello to the audience as well. So I'm Travers Clark Walker, Chief Marketing Officer at Thought Machine. So Thought Machine is a next generation core banking vendor deployed in multiple live instances around the world. The company was founded back in 2014, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more detail in terms of the whole kind of cloud story and how we've, again, ridden the wave of how cloud infrastructure has kind of come to the point of maturity in the financial services market.
No, thank you so much, everyone. I mean, I work very closely with you and your teams, especially on this front as well. And you guys are all doing fabulous jobs. And Matthew, you did mention, mission critical. And I think that is quite key to our conversation today. So, and I'm going to ask you all this question, but why is it so important for businesses to have scalable infrastructure? And what is the key role of the cloud in that? Matthew, do you want to go first?
Yes, sure. Look, it gives people the flexibility to deploy applications and run applications as and when needed, and give access to the right clients. We just talking a second ago there around deployed globally. Most banks and fintechs will need to deploy globally for local access and access to local clients. The days of building and running your own data centers, it still has a place for certain applications. And that's something I will talk a bit about later on. But just to have the ability to scale up and scale down on infrastructure on a network basis is really important to the banks and the financial services world going forwards, for sure.
Thank you. And Jason, do you want to add anything to it?
Yeah, I think Matthew's completely right there. I think it's definitely on the critical path for most companies to be completely fair, being able to pivot at pace and at scale as and when needed, without having to sort of break the bank, no pun intended, is vitally important.
Eric?
Well, Matthew, you did such a resume, synthesis, that I'm afraid I agree with you as well. But I mean, we need to probably talk about what are the alternatives. I mean, before you had to send people with a cable and boxes at night in the morning. So those days, capacity to scale up and down is extremely important. And I think there's actually on our side where we provide a banking as a service multi-tenant infrastructure, so it's very important to segregate everything. And in fact, the capacity to ramp up quickly is I mean, the cloud is a dream for that. I mean, it's day and night between what we had before. So I think, of course, we're endorsing the cloud massively. The limitation is some of the banks are still a bit prudent, but fortunately, it's changing.
It's very good to hear. And I think Thought Machine, Travers, you probably have a lot to add because you are working with banks on this front as well.
Well, we are. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I agree with all the points that have been made. Of course, I think one of the other lenses perhaps is to kind of take it to the consumer or the client end and look at it from, you know, how the requirements of the clients are changing, and therefore the reliance upon scalable infrastructure is fundamental. You know, if we look at the changing landscape in the future, everything will be digital only, everything will be real time, everything will start to have customer centricity associated with it. And the fundamental requirement, of course, is that the infrastructure is able to service and support those new consumer experiences, new consumer needs, and the previous generation of infrastructure is not able to. So there is an imperative, if you like, for the banks to make that transition and start the move, because the experiences that are being demanded in the market are there and present today. So yes, the choice is there, but also the demand is there.
I like that. The choice and the demand is there. And before I pose the next question, I just want to tell our audience, feel free to send in some questions of yours, and we will try and, you know, answer some of them towards the end of the webinar. So Travers, you did talk about that. And what do you think are the benefits of public clouds? You know, it's pretty obvious with features such as, you know, horizontal scaling and infrastructure as code. Do you see any potential pitfalls of using a public cloud provider versus using a private cloud provider?
So not pitfalls as such, but there are things to look out for. And I think the most critical one of that is not just porting previous generations of software and applications into public cloud, because you don't realize the benefits of the public cloud accordingly. As you make the pivot, it is also about the software and the applications that you are running in the private cloud, in the public cloud. So this isn't just a debate around private infrastructure or public infrastructure. It's also a debate around the types of applications and the architectural principles that you're putting to those applications as you move forward. So to answer directly the question, are there any downsides to public cloud? Not in any materiality. Regulators have and are globally starting to accept public cloud as a deployment choice right the way down to core systems. Yes, there are things like PII data handling and local residency of data and so on, of course, and these need to be deeply understood. So you have to recognize the environment in which you're operating as to whether or not you can fully adopt public cloud. But I guess my key aspect is it's also as much about the technology choices that you're making to run on it as it is the infrastructure. And when those two things come together, then you get the full benefit of public cloud infrastructure.
That's pretty cool to know. Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
Again, I'm afraid I agree with Travers, but one thing to add is, in fact, the global, it's not completely globally availability everywhere yet. So I think there's some jurisdiction where you've got constraints. Of course, there's no, there's no comparison between a cloud strategy and the past. It's superior. So I think we'll have a full coverage, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years, or maybe faster, because in fact, it's what we're doing in the UK or what's happening in the US is setting precedents for other countries. So it's very difficult to be, outside this movement. So it makes a lot of sense to go full speed.
Jason?
Yeah, a bit like Eric, I've not really got much more to add to that. Yeah, Travers got that bang on.
Yeah.
Matthew, do you need to add something to it as well?
Yeah, so look, I'm going to take a slightly different tack on this. In that, yes, there's definitely a place for private and public clouds. There is still a place for dedicated data centers and dedicated infrastructure, and it really comes down to, as we were saying earlier, the applications. but really the use of the application, whether that technology is best placed in each of those 3 locations. So, for example, a lot of what BSO does is trading infrastructure. So people that are trading on exchanges on a global basis, be it crypto, be it derivatives or equities exchanges, and a lot of that time the public cloud does not fit for that purpose. So, for example, we have a lot of clients that use very dedicated and specialized hardware, and the generic one-size-fits-all hardware that you'll get with the hyperscalers doesn't work for that, because they use this hardware to create a competitive edge. So there's still definitely a demand for that. And sometimes the commercials of the public cloud don't always work. Storage, for example, great until you need to extract your data, and then it can become very expensive. So again, there are private clouds, private storage companies that offer a similar service that gets the data out of your data centers into an expert's data center, but that doesn't have the sometimes punitive commercial model that you might get with one of the public clouds. So I think it's very important to understand what application you've got, and then look at where it's best to fit long term. You don't always need the flexibility and scalability of the cloud. Sometimes the dedicated hardware gives a much better return for your investment. So yeah, it's down to application by application for sure.
So one size does not fit all.
Really.
So my next question.
Hybrid approach.
That's quite good to know, actually, because literally my next question, and you kind of answered it already, but I was going to ask, what do you need to consider before deciding on move on to either or? And how are the considerations different for financial institutions versus fintechs? Are there any trends you're seeing? Because I do believe you work with both sides of the clientele.
So were you asking that?
Anyone?
Yeah. Matthew, go on. Sorry, I should have said that.
No, go on. You go first. So go on. Go for it. Sorry, Trevor.
Oh, I'll go on. I was going to kind of double down on your point of hybrid. So look, I think banks inevitably are going to follow, in many respects, hybrid strategies for certain key parts of the systems. And again, back to the kind of technology choices, you should be identifying technology choices that allow that to be the case, that allow you to deploy onto private infrastructure if you either legally require it from a regulatory perspective, or because you have some preference for it for certain systems. So I do think the kind of construct of your application set has to take into account the ability to have hybrid, and to take things like Red Hat's OpenShift and deploy cloud native technologies onto private infrastructure should you choose to do so, but then take the horizontal scalability of leaning on public cloud infrastructure to then do the scaling outside of it. So I guess I'm agreeing with the strategy that says in certain scenarios a combination of the two, and then that also applies to being able to, if you like, be hybrid across the public cloud infrastructure providers as well, where it's a requirement.
Matthew?
Yeah, I think the different cloud providers do offer very different services. It's all around the technology that they have sitting in those clouds that you need to use. So it's not just VM machines and things like that. There's a lot of applications that you should pick based on the application, and the different cloud providers, as I said, will all offer different services. I think the hybrid cloud is certainly the approach that we're seeing from our clients. I was talking to a tier 1 bank the other day that has trading infrastructure in various data centers globally. It's getting full. They need to put more trading servers in, so they're going to take out less critical infrastructure and put that into one of the cloud providers, and focus their data centers really on that critical trading infrastructure. Anything that's a little bit more generic, any kind of storage, they're going to park somewhere else. And I think that's a really good approach to the hybrid, as I was saying, that where it's critical, you have your own hardware, and where it's not, you then put it into a cloud. And these cloud providers are expert at what they do. I know there have been some outages, but they are experts. And I think when sometimes when people say, I'd rather have it in-house because my own guys know what they're doing. Actually, this is what these guys do for a living, and the expertise is significant. So, the security, the cyber, I'm sure we'll talk about that later, is second to none with the big hyperscalers for sure.
Eric, I saw you smiling out there.
No, yeah, in fact, yeah, we run and operate both cloud and private cloud. But my point is that I'd like to run less and less on private cloud. Usually, it's for regulatory reason, or it's not always for good reasons. Yeah, it's for so I think that's the problem. So when you dig a little bit, then you can try to migrate some of those mission critical projects that are supposed to be absolutely on the private cloud into the public cloud. So actually, we've done that successfully with a bank. Because in fact, what was mandatory at the beginning became less sexy over time. Yeah, so that it's when you look at, 5 years ago there was, most banks, they were completely anti-cloud. 3 years ago they were all in San Francisco doing customer stories with Google, Amazon, and all these guys. So it's just a wave, and I think the as you said, Matthew, the guys in house doing a better job than Amazon, Google, or I don't really buy that. It's so I think it's just the education of the regulator or the financial regulator to in fact push we should question and challenge why do we still need a private cloud, because quite frankly I think they do a better job on the public cloud than we could ever do on the private cloud. It's a business. Yeah, so it's not a service or a division of the company. It's a service you tap into, and it's I think hopefully the future.
Fair enough. And Jason, I know you have been closely working with a lot of startups, a lot of fintechs. So do you think there is a specific point in the life of a startup where it makes sense to bring your infrastructure into private cloud versus hosting everything in the public cloud? And if there are any case studies that you can share with us?
So I think it very much aligns to what Eric just said around regulatory reasons is usually the main cause for then having to take something into private cloud. So for example, hitting PCI DSS, level 1. At that point, there's some in the past that's been quite difficult to do on public cloud. QSA auditors have not been have not taken it too kindly to running things in, say, Fargate and other types of platforms on public cloud, and so therefore it's been quite difficult to do. But over time that has changed. The attitude, the education, as Eric says, of these frameworks and of these bodies is improving, and they are slowly, but they are starting to catch up. And so
I think there's another example I can give. We are now connected. We have our processing engine is now directly connected to MasterCard on the cloud. So in the past we had to do 5 different hardware installation across the globe. Now it's a single instance. Our HSMs are on the cloud. I mean, it is absolutely massive. It's really, really new. So I think that was something that was impossible to put on the cloud, and now it is. So it was all physical. You have to buy a very expensive box to decrypt the PIN. So now it's all on the cloud. So it's a massive change in very little time. So I think I believe that we'll be more and more able to challenge those regulatory blockers who reduce the adoption of the cloud. So I think there's a lot of pioneer of the cloud on this panel. So we've learned the hard way. But I think we will prevail.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that there's also an ownership on the hyperscalers to make sure that their attestation keeps pace. Okay? So, for example, when they do release, especially new PaaS elements to their portfolio, it does sometimes take them a bit of time to get their attestations in place. That allows fintechs and other companies to actually use those products, because they wouldn't stand up against an auditor who comes in and starts to poke around. We have to have those to be able to consume them. So there is definitely a big ownership on them to be able to turn that around. I mean, I think it took quite a while for some of the latter stuff to get attestation in certain areas. So it's definitely vitally important that also keeps pace with the technology.
I think that's a question that as within the fintech industry that we keep talking about regulation versus innovation. And we
Yeah.
can go on and on that front. But, we have spoken about a lot of, fintechs and, smaller companies and startups. How about tier one banks? I mean, I know a lot of you are working with them as well. So how are the big tier one banks approaching their cloud strategy? Travers, I'm looking at you first.
Okay. So I think it can best be described as fully embracing it now. I mean, we have seen a number of tier one banks around the world, pen significant deals with the large cloud infrastructure providers, and with their subsequent stated intent of porting, large scale systems across. This again is combined with, if you like, the maturity of the fintech sector bringing out product that the banks can lean on. Eric was talking about everything from digital HSMs in payment schemes. The whole software and infrastructure is now moving to a point of completely being acceptable. Yes, there's some regulatory bits in certain markets, and yes, there's attestation requirements. But I think the fundamentally, our experience at least is tier one banks are now embracing it as a forward strategy. They're embracing both the infrastructure and the next generation of technology. Now, that's still a big job. If you're, the migration, the transformation efforts of, disentangling a previous generation of technology sets and re-architecting for the future. And we see different strategies emerging. So we see the strategy of the digital greenfield, where a bank builds effectively a new technology stack on the side and starts putting its customers in that technology stack and putting its new industry product. We see a coexistence where they're putting these systems side by side and doing sharded migration. And we see a number of them effectively going for a, full on, okay, I'm gonna set myself a time-bound migration period where I'm going to move to a new technology stack. But fundamentally, tier ones are now embracing it. And I think there's a question actually in the panel somewhere, I think, about talent. I think one of the other things is the bank's state of preparedness needs to be built up as well. And that's partly a talent. It's partly ensuring the regulatory regime around them understands their intended strategy. And it's partly buying into, internal reorganization to adopt. But there is an embracement, or they're embracing it now, but there's also getting to a state of full preparedness for it. And I think that's fundamentally how we see it.
It's refreshing to see that happen as well, right? Like, Eric, you mentioned like 5 years ago, it was very different. So Eric, do you want to add something to this as well?
Well, I think what we see there's a few banks that we work with the Crédit Agricole, for example, and a few other tier one banks, but they're all doing deals. So that now they have a deal. Yeah, the deal is done. What do they do with the deal? That's another question, because of course they've got I would say thousands of people. That we used to do that. So there's a social issue. So I think they need to find the right project, and of course they need to redeploy talent. It's true that all our banking clients, they've got not only legacy technology issue, they've got as well in some cases legacy staff issues. So they need to protect, their teams. My question is more, they've all done the deal. Great. So how do they implement the deal? And I think that sometimes, in most cases, they do. It's like with SAP. It's my own cloud. It's my, it's Google, Amazon, but it's my way. Yeah. So they're making it as specific as they can. So in fact, you end up with something, definitely not necessarily standard that you need to adapt to, but. I mean, it's encouraging. You've got now bankers talking about the cloud. So and it came from the top as well. From what we saw, it came from the very senior management, sometimes the board. And I think the banks will employ more and more people who are not bankers. They come from other industries, and they take big decisions in fact to change the mindset as well. It's not only technical; it's as well mindset, and that needs to be explained properly, because when you have thousands of people, you need to take the time to communicate the right way. So that they took probably 2 years, most of them, to communicate before doing a deal. now I'm eager to see what they will do with these big announcements and start using it at full speed.
I was going to say education is something that's continuously coming up while we're discussing this topic. Matthew, how are you seeing the change?
So I think we're probably seeing the same thing. Going back a few years ago, there was a lot more reluctance, but much more recently, there's announcements of the deals that Eric's mentioned. Also, a lot of the banks that I talk to have a cloud-first strategy, and if you're, a layer down, not the chief executive, but if you're running a project that you need to deploy somewhere, you have to have a very good reason why you wouldn't put it in the cloud, rather than 4 or 5 years ago you needed a really good reason why you would put it in there. So I think there's a fundamental change around that, which is quite interesting. But again, it kind of coming back to what I was talking about earlier. I was talking to a head of compliance recently, and they were literally going application by application, which one could go public, which one needed to be private, which one needed to be on-prem because of data sovereignty or other rules. And I've only been in London for a year. My background is being in Asia, and across Asia, every country has its own rules, and it's not just Asia. A lot of people I talk to think it's just Asia, but Indonesia has different rules to Hong Kong, and etc. etc. So that you have to take all those different regulations and rules into account. So it's a massive undertaking. Eric's quite right. They've done the big announcements, but now actually, what do we do with that? And I think the other thing, just as a network provider, we talk to people about how they get their data from their premises to the cloud and back out, and how do you replicate between different cloud instances, how you get from Azure to AWS, etc. And a lot of those things at that kind of detail level really haven't been thought of yet. And I always like my car analogies. You always think, they're launching all the new Formula One cars for this year at the moment. But, imagine if a team hadn't even thought about what tyres to use, and you've spent billions on a car, but then you haven't got any tyres to fit on it. And, you really need to get down to this level of detail and figure out actually what performance do I need for which application, where will it be in the world, what the sovereignty and all that. It's huge. I mean, it's huge. And the other thing that I do see from the tier one banks, and again, it goes back to the questions around hiring. Nearly everyone I speak to is running out of people at the moment. They've got projects on the go, but I can't do it because I haven't got the right people to do X, Y, and Z. And that does seem to be a real challenge in London at the moment. That's one I can't answer, but certainly on the technology challenges, finding the right partner to work with, the right cloud provider, the right networks, etc. It's really important.
I was actually going to say there was one of the questions that we have received from the audience, and Travers, you briefly did touch on that, so I will bring it up and we can mark it as answered. But someone is asking, where are you guys finding the pain points when it comes to hiring talent? And I know you guys have briefly mentioned it.
Well, first, there's nobody with 10 years of cloud experience. Yeah, so I think you need to find people who are curious, people you can have lunch or dinner with, and buy a candle and pray that they will fit the job. I think if you have 1 or 2 years, it's already a lot. I like people on my side who have touched, not only AWS, but maybe the other clouds. So that brings. I think it's all about. Mental agility, because you can't check. You can do a checklist of about So no, I mean, there's not enough precedent or history to like on other technologies. So I think that's. And as I agree, recruiting in London right now is quite tough. So it's super challenging. And it's from all sides, big company, small company with no revenues, whatever. Yeah. So it's, but I think there's quite. We need to remain as employer. We need to remain very open and ask questions that are probably a bit lateral. We have the lateral thinking here. Yeah, because we can't check. I mean, we want people who can endorse the future, not necessarily people who have to repeat what they've done before.
I think I think there are a few things that we actually, as an industry, can do in support, though, right? So one is, as we deploy this generation of technology out, it's actually incumbent on us as vendors to make sure that we're providing the necessary development skills, continuous professional development for people to be able to actually adopt this technology. So I don't think we should naturally go, there's a talent gap and therefore that's a problem. We should actually say we need to face into that problem and become part of the solution. And so certainly from a Thought Machine perspective, we put a lot of time and effort in creating the right competencies and training and support so that the clients can adopt our technology more straightforwardly without otherwise being the case. And then I think more generally, kind of wider industry piece, is people are attracted to challenging endeavors. So, if you're a bank and you're struggling with, the attraction of talent, then to some extent you need to lay your case out for, this is going to be a challenging environment. We're going to do great things. We're going to move the bank forward and make it an attractive place to work accordingly, as opposed to looking at, well, it's looking after the previous generation of technology, etc. So I think there's some collective accountability in, there's a talent gap. Yes, we all recognize that. But the collective accountability is to go, let's make it challenging and interesting, part of the industry to join, and then take our responsibility of upskilling and up-tooling those that don't have those skills at the moment, because they clearly have the capacity to adapt these skills or adopt these skills. We have to provide the capability to do that.
That's very well said. I think upskilling is a key thing I think we're facing as an industry as a whole on digital skills. Matthew, Jason, anything to add on the talent front?
Yeah, I've been recruiting in old school infrastructure and cloud infrastructure, aka DevOps now, which is pretty much why we have the main challenge. Is that in the old days where we had a nice bit of tin, it was quite easy to go and get an infrastructure engineer or an ops engineer and be at it. But now trying to get DevOps engineers by definition have to be multi-skilled. They can't just look after the scope that they used to before. So the scope's widened, which is why we do have a much more, I suppose, a much bigger challenge to try and get the right people in, because we now have to take in a huge range of skills, and they have to, be demonstrable skills that we can actually see and get. But equally, I think people need to. I think there's an association that when you do stuff in the cloud, everything's really quick, and so therefore they expect to just have people that can hit the ground running. And I found it's much better, and we kind of do so at your boundaries, to actually give people the opportunity to grow, and therefore they do get that career progression. So trying to actually expect that someone's not going to come in and know absolutely everything about the cloud is what you should be trying to do, rather than finding that unicorn of a person that can come in and just basically do everything you want them to. You'll have a much easier ride, and you'll see lower attrition rates, and you get a much better culture out of it.
That's great. Matthew?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is I think that it's also the bank's responsibility to make themselves attractive to recruiting, bright young people. We're based in Shoreditch, so we're kind of in the little fintech area here. And I'm one of the oldest people I see walking around the local area. You've got a lot of bright young things out here, and I talk to them in the local coffee shops and whatnot. And would they really be attracted to go and work for a tier one bank when they could go and work for a company like Thought Machine, which is much more innovative and exciting? And you can wear your jeans and your trainers and things like that. Whereas sometimes I think the big corporates are still seen as quite stuffy and inflexible. And I know there's been a lot in the press around this recently, but the flexibility of working, where you work from, these kind of things is really important. And when you're trying to attract talent, and a lot of people are after the same, a lot of employers are after the same type of people, those issues are really important. And people can pick and choose at the moment where they want to go and work. And I think that it's all really important. And someone's put a question around ESG as well, which is a topic quite close to my heart. And I think that as well, when people are looking at prospective employers, they want to know what their ESG policies are. as well. And so I think all of those areas, those kind of soft areas, are really important these days. And some companies may not, think in that way, but I know a lot of others do. So yeah.
I would definitely double down on that point, Matthew. I mean, we could probably run an entire seminar on the cultural structures that you need to put in place to be a great place to work. For this level of talent. But it is a combination of the soft cultural aspects of the clubs and the community and your ESG policies, etc., and then having really challenging tasks. People love challenging work. To run a little bit in defence to financial service businesses and the banks, I do see a change happening. I do see the banks stepping up and actually saying, we can't be seen as being the stuffy, institutional business of the past. We have to actually be attractive to this talent as well. So I think I think that is changing and developing around the world.
There's a shift. Yeah, I mean, that's what they're saying, right? They're coining the word that this is going to be the year of the Great Resignation. So I think as employers, we all have to ensure that you're making it a great place to work. And I think upskilling is a very big part of that as well. So before I move on to one of my questions, there's another one which, Matthew, you slightly touched on. So I would like to take that from the audience as well. And anyone else who would like to pick on that. Does data sovereignty and ownership of the cloud provider affect technology decisions? That is US versus European providers.
Well, I can say yes, definitely. Yeah. The answer is massively yes. I think there's European banks. They're usually big domestic, big in their country, and then they export. But it's very, very touchy. Yeah. So I think, of course, the European they say they don't like the Americans, but actually they do. But on data, they always find good reason to not to do things. But so I think, and it's true that it all comes from the US, Azure, AWS. Where is the European cloud? Not much.
I would just throw in the Asian cloud there, though. I mean, having just moved over from Hong Kong, Ali Cloud is
Alibaba.
All dominant. So if it's not just US versus European, you've got to look at the Asian providers as well.
Yeah, and that sort of leads you on to multi-cloud as well. That's kind of for us when we're selling products. In the past, that's been a big requirement that we have to then take into account, because hyperscalers are not in every country. So when you do have to think about sovereignty, that then really does drive what abstraction tools you put in place and make your platform really and truly multi-cloud.
And talking about the public cloud, moving on to my next question. How do you avoid a vendor lock-in and therefore being at the mercy of the cloud provider in terms of the, price of the services provided? I know it's a tricky question, but Eric, Matthew, this one's for you both.
Actually, you don't, yeah. I'm prisoner of my computer here. Yeah, mine was not working on BrightTalk, so you have to choose your dependency. But if there's no dependency, you're back to pen and paper. Yeah. So I think it's of course you to mitigate the risk as much as you can, but at some point it creates a dependency. There's a stickiness from the technology vendor that of course you can mitigate whatever, but that it's made for that. You've got Google is free, but they make a lot of money. Yeah. So it's
Matthew?
I don't mind to be dependent from something that works, quite frankly. So it's still better than what we had before. So it's better than an Encyclopedia Universalis. It's better. I used to have the 24 or 36 tomes. You had all the world in all the books. Now you go on Google, you have everything. So I'm dependent from Google. Okay, happy about it.
Matthew?
Yeah, look, it's multi-cloud, right? If you lock in with a single vendor, the same with anything, you can leave yourself open going forwards. Again, it comes back to the application. Pick the technology partner per application, but also I think it is very important. There are companies out there that work alongside the cloud providers, like ourselves, but there are lots of people that you can put your storage somewhere else. You don't have to put everything into one cloud provider. You pick where you put your storage, pick where you put your applications, some private data centers, some private cloud, some public cloud. It's the same as I was saying earlier, but that has the commercial benefit of not being able to play one off against each other because it's for different purposes, but not being pulled into a single company, I think would be very sensible.
But then, there are now several large cloud service providers in the market. So, if one were to decide to move on to the public cloud, how do you actually decide, what provider to go for, and any considerations to keep in mind when choosing your cloud strategy?
Well, to some extent, this is follow up to the previous question, which is, what's the availability, what's the AZs, what's the systems availability, and so on, and then what technology have you chosen to run on it? As a combination of all of those as to your outcome. To some extent, I agree with Eric. The combination of all of that is, at the end, you will to some extent be locked in. But if you make the right choices going in, then you limit that. And to Matthew's point, different systems can be run on different cloud providers, and therefore within the financial institution at large, you haven't got a single provider, cloud infrastructure provider. You can have multi. Certainly from a Thought Machine perspective, not because we were being particularly clever about it, but we built Vault to be cloud agnostic because we knew there were different dependencies on different cloud vendors around the world, and banks would make different choices. Now, that benefits us because it means that we can deploy it into any cloud infrastructure and indeed into hybrid and on-prem. So as a bank looks at it, or a financial service business looks at it, they can go, okay, what technology choices have I got and where can I place these? And that reduces your vendor lock-in to some extent. But the reality is you will have built your technology stacks in some way, and they will eventually be, difficult to unpick, but not impossible. And the difference, I guess, between now and the past is it will be much more straightforward to port from one to another and to swap a technology choice out from one to another. So there is more flexibility than they've had, and therefore less real lock-in. But the reality is you are going to coalesce certain systems and certain infrastructure around a certain architecture because it will be efficient to do so.
Efficiency, fair enough. Jason, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's also a consideration for the tech stack you're going to run. So, for example, in Microsoft Land, they've got a product called Azure Arc that will allow you to run your containerized workflows across all providers. So, if you're going to go with the right abstraction layers, that will give you the opportunity to be able to truly go multi-cloud with very little friction. It's not completely frictionless, but there is a lot less friction. But it really just comes down to your risk appetite as a business. Is the vendor lock-in a big enough risk or a regulatory blocker that you have to try and mitigate that? And that's really ultimately where it comes down to. You kind of decide, are we going to mitigate this or not? For most companies, the answer is no. And it's the same type of thing when you talk about, region and stuff like that. Do we go multi-AZ, multi-region? Most companies go no, because actually the amount of downtime that AWS has, I think, unscheduled outages when I looked years ago was like in the hours. And that was on particular regions. It's really quite low. These guys are very good at what they do, and that's why they're so successful.
Fair enough. Matthew, Eric?
No, I agree.
There's not much to say on that, I don't think.
Okay. No, fair enough. I mean, efficiency, hybrid strategy, risk appetite, all of that comes in, right? And there was one of the questions from the audience, again, which I would like to take, is resilience as well. So resilience is a word of the hour within financial services, particularly with the regulators, our favorite topic. Could I ask, what does resilience mean to the panel, and does resilience present any issues in relation to scalability?
I'm happy to start on that one.
Yes,
Thank you.
As an infrastructure provider, our whole being is to ensure that data gets from where it's coming from to where it needs to be at the right time in a safe, secure manner. So resilience is everything. Resilience on part of network, so that if one of your network links fails, you have a backup link or a tertiary link or others, going into different cloud providers, making sure that the access to those is fully resilient, so you can always get your data in and out. For the regulators, obviously, you have to store and prove, in some instances, prove where your data is stored, but you mustn't lose your data. MiFID rules and lots of other rules that you have to be able to, access to your data in a timely manner, recreate trades in a timely manner. So it's all around, as I said earlier, mission critical data. It's all around making sure that, from our point of view, making sure that your network infrastructure is built in a way that you mitigate as many risks as you can, and that's kind of what BSO does. So the resilience, to me, is just, it's our lifeblood, to be honest. So any data to anywhere in the world when it's needed, that's what we do, and that's why it's so important.
Well, actually, it's a prerequisite to the business we're doing. If you're not resilient, you have no business. You're like back to the Middle Age. So I think it's there's no middle ground. Yeah, it's 100% resilient, or you're out of business. So it's it's very, it's the blood, as you described. It's pretty much true. I mean, we operate a private cloud or cloud infrastructure. It's the target is 100%. It's not 99.01. I think it's otherwise it's a lot of hours of disruption. So for the clients. So no, I think it's building strategies to make sure you can sleep at night and you're sure it's 100%.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Travers, you had?
Well, I was just going to perhaps marginally widen the definition of the word resilience, because a lot of that was kind of infrastructure and the data management piece. But again, we're in a generation of technology, so microservice architectures that are self-healing. All the data is, encrypted in transit and encrypted at rest. These all add to the whole storybook of resilience in a system. So I'm kind of 100% behind Eric, right? I mean, all of this has to be fully resilient, and is proven to be so. And I think that's the fundamental point. It is a point where it is proven to be so, and therefore, can be adopted accordingly.
Mason?
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I don't think there's much more insight I can add. You guys pretty much summed it up quite well. I would say that resiliency, again, is another risk appetite question. How resilient do you want to make a product or a component of a platform? And that then informs. So those non-functional requirements are key.
Fair enough. And moving on to one more question from the audience, and this is about ESG, which Matthew did hit on previously as well. As fintechs look to scale, how do these businesses, and I believe you guys, ensure that you're taking ESG risk into consideration?
Kind of a quick go at it, I think. I'm going to widen the question slightly. ESG, we covered it a little bit in terms of the whole kind of employee attractiveness. So, attracting people who want to come and join a business because they stand for certain things. They stand for challenging work, they stand for a great place to work, and they stand for things like their environmental policies. But I also think it's important, just in the context of who we sell into, that we understand that the whole industry's march towards credibility and proven ESG policies and behaviours are important. Now, a big part of that is being able to say to banks, hey, move your technology in the following way to this generation, and the combination results to you as a bank are much lower cost, more resiliency to the earlier point, but also a much smaller environmental footprint as a result of it, because your technology is scaling at a point when it's in use and isn't when it isn't. So there is an immediate benefit, if you like, into a bank's ESG policy. But the bit I was going to widen out to was, but it's also a responsibility of ours to understand all of the agendas of a bank. So that can be everything from transactional behavior to anti-money laundering to ESG, etc. So actually navigating all of the things that a bank are going to want from us to be able to, for us to prove to them we have a competency in, is important. But to the ESG itself specifically, we can do much more good as a result of that good that we can do within the bank than we can do in the businesses ourselves. And other than that, obviously have your localized policies of, referees management and building management and running everything on the cloud and so on. Of course, all of those are just, they're table stakes in running this type of organization at these types of scale.
Matthew, anything to add to that front?
Just a tiny bit, really, just to emphasize the importance of ESG when people are planning their technology projects. It is, certainly within, again, there was a question about the tier one banks. It's top of the agenda on a tier one bank is, and I was talking about the bank earlier that are looking to move some of their non-critical servers onto the cloud, how they can, lower their carbon emissions and become more environmentally conscious with these applications is absolutely one of the objectives. And it's the importance of this is huge. There are data centers in Iceland and Norway, etc., that have geothermal power, if I got the word right. And there are other areas that you can look at. It doesn't all have to be in London or New York. You can look at some of these other areas to deploy as a way of meeting your ESG targets. So very interesting area, certainly again for the younger ones, very, very important. And can't overstress that, make sure you plan that into your project at the early stages for sure.
I was going to say, the fact that we're even getting these questions, it's so refreshing, isn't it? Because a couple of years ago, it wouldn't be on top of mind. And talking about Norway, I had visited Norway a couple of years ago, and I stayed in a hotel which was completely 100% run on renewable energy, and I thought that was great. Eric, Jason, anything you would like to add on the ESG front?
Well, on our side, we serve with our platform different kind of clients. So there's one teenager bank that we power across Europe, and they've asked us to be they sent us some consultant to be audited in terms of a carbon footprint, because their clients 15 to 18, they want to know what's going on here, if we're using if we're wasting energy or not. So I think we're probably 80% of the carbon footprint of our clients. So I think that's something we'll see more and more, and I think then we can use that as probably a recruitment tool for younger generation, because they're keen to know that we tackle the problem seriously. And I think for big banks, I think it's like with the cloud, they make big announcements. Now they need to make sure they start working on it, because their footprint is of course bigger than the smaller companies. But so no, I think it's for us it's a key topic across the board, and same for our clients.
So good to hear the millennial generation, is taking charge.
Pushing.
Yeah, we're seeing much the same over at Ebola. So we do see a lot of candidates that come through that are interested in these topics. So it's definitely something that we're also keeping an eye on, and ensuring that we do our part. And
I mean, they don't want to see that as a topic. They want to see that as in our blood, basically in our mindset.
It's the core.
So we need to demonstrate that.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us, and the audience for all the questions. But to all the panels, before I let you go, your closing thoughts. So what does cloud mean for the future of financial services and fintech industry? Should I nominate, or? Okay, Matthew.
I knew I shouldn't have nodded. I mean, look, it's the future, right? I mean, we've covered it in so many different topics. We haven't even looked so far at crypto and DeFi, and the way the financial services may change over the next few years. We talked a bit about some of the younger generation and what they're doing, and I have a godson who I saw him the other day, and he was trading cryptos on his phone, and going back to when I was his age, I wasn't doing things like that. And these applications are running the cloud. When you've got the blockchains that are now a whole new way of storing and sharing information, and whether the smart contracts for land registry and everything else, it's all going to be cloud-based. And it's just changing the way that we run things. It's going to change the way that we register cars and register weddings and land ownership and stuff like that going forwards. It's going to make a massive change to the banks if DeFi and the cryptos go as expected. And I think the technology is there to make this transformation happen for sure. And what an exciting time over the next few years! Absolutely tremendous.
It really is. I think
I love these kind of topics. I talk about that, which I won't, but it's a fantastic future ahead of us.
Yeah, I think it's going to affect key areas of a lot of parts of our lives, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Travers?
Yeah, I mean, in many respects, there's not much to add other than what does it mean for the future? I mean, it is the future. There's almost a full stop at the end of that sentence in the way that Matthew covered it all off. But, just to add it, is we live in it's a digital-only, real-time, rich data and analytics environment against, all our walks of life, not just financial services, but all our walks of life. But, if anybody is in any doubt at all that cloud infrastructure and the applications that are run on it are important for financial services, we need to dispel them of that delusion immediately. It is the future, full stop.
Yeah, it is the present, and hopefully, it will be, in fact, hopefully in a few years, people will look at this debate as a weird debate because it will be a de facto standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Anything else to add, Eric, Jason?
Well, what I can add is that because of the cloud, we can onboard great projects. So now the limit is not who knows how to plug a cable on a box. It's great business cases, fantastic ideas. I mean, if you look back, it was we used to have an army to do the production and all that. Now you can do that much faster. So you can relocate resources into the business case, and then deploy globally, because that's what that means. Before you had to go country per country, a complete nightmare. So now you can have very successful small and global organization with very innovative business cases. So I think that's the present, and I've got no doubt it's going to be absolutely dominant in the next quarters.
Absolutely, I think it's key to ours. I mean, we're a cloud-centric platform, and our it allows us to be able to onboard banks far quicker, and we've won business because of that, because of the way that we can actually get stuff up and running. It is just phenomenally quick compared to the old days. So it is maturing and advancing at such a pace that it's quite frankly quite fun to try and keep up with, but it is definitely and absolutely the way forward.
Well, the time's up. Thank you so much. I really thoroughly enjoyed the discussion, and it's just so nice to be so forward thinking. Like, Travers, you said challenging. Eric, you said it's the present, how it's going to be the future, the millennial generation, resilience, it's so key. It's so key to what we are talking right now and what we are doing at this point. So thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you so much, Eric and Travers. Hope to see you guys soon again in person, fingers crossed. And to all our panelists and to everyone who joined us today, thank you so much. Please do go on, Bankables, BSO's, Thought Machine's website, as well as Yobota's website. Feel free to get in touch with their teams. They're doing some great work out there. And hopefully we'll also welcome you in person during the Innovate Finance Global Summit on the 4th and the 5th of April. Well, all of these companies will be presenting themselves as well. And let's leave with a very good thought that is going to be a very, very bright future ahead of us. And in London, it's sunny for a change. So, hey, the weather is agreeing with us.
Right.
Thank you so
Thank you very much. Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rashi.
Bye.